My wife texted me at midnight telling me she'd inherited $4.7 million from the father who disowned her a decade ago, and that I had until Friday to get out of our house. She thought I'd be devastated. She thought I'd beg. She thought 12 years of marriage meant I'd just accept my fate and disappear quietly while she ran off to Vienna with the ex-boyfriend I didn't know she'd been seeing for a year. What Franka didn't know was that I'd already found her locked box in the garage. I'd already seen the flight records, the second phone, the emails to her divorce lawyer from 4 months ago. And I'd already called the best attorney in Charlotte. By the time she walked through our front door expecting to find me broken, I'd already filed an emergency injunction that froze everything she'd been planning. What happened next is the most satisfying revenge story you'll hear all year. Viewers, would you ever suspect your spouse of planning your destruction for over a year while smiling at you every morning? Drop a comment below. Before this story begins, subscribe. You'll never look at relationships the same way again. My name is Carter Williams. I'm 38 years old, a civil engineer living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and until 2 nights ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. I design bridges and highway expansions for a mid-sized construction firm, pulling in around $95,000 a year. It's honest work, the kind that makes you tired but satisfied. For 12 years, I've been married to Franka, this free-spirited Austrian woman I met during a college exchange program. She was studying art, painting these incredible landscapes that made you feel like you were standing right there in the mountains. We fell hard and fast, got married young, and I moved us to Charlotte for my career. She worked part-time at a gallery, nothing too serious, but I never minded carrying the financial weight. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something real. It was a Tuesday night, late March, around 11:47. I was already in bed, half dead after another brutal day at the I-77 expansion site. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The blue glow lit up the dark bedroom. Franka wasn't home. She'd said she was staying late at her mother's place across town, helping organize old family documents. I figured she'd text me goodnight or tell me she was staying over. Instead, I got this: my father died. I inherited everything. $4.7 million. The house is mine now. I want you out by Friday. Don't make this difficult. I read it 3 times. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Her father? Heinrich? The wealthy Austrian businessman who disowned her when she married me over a decade ago? The man who called me an American with no pedigree and cut her off completely? Franka rarely talked about him. What I knew came in fragments. He was a real estate developer in Vienna. When Franka was 19, her mother died of cancer and Heinrich turned cold, controlling. When she told him about our engagement, he told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life. She cried for weeks after the wedding, mourning the loss of her father. Eventually, she seemed to accept he was gone. Or so I thought. I sat up in bed, hands shaking. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I texted back, "What are you talking about? Can we please talk about this?" No response. I didn't sleep that night. I kept refreshing my phone, waiting for an explanation, for her to call and tell me this was some horrible misunderstanding. But nothing came. Just silence. Just that cold, clinical message glowing on my screen. The woman I'd loved for 12 years had just evicted me from my own life with fewer words than it takes to order coffee. And somewhere deep in my gut, beneath the shock and confusion, something else was stirring. A cold, clear realization that nothing about this made sense. And that I needed to find out why. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think straight. I needed answers and I needed them now. Franka still wasn't home. Her mother's house showed no signs of her car when I drove past at dawn. Something was wrong. Something beyond the obvious nightmare of that text message. I went through Franka's home office, a small converted bedroom where she kept her art supplies and personal files. I'd never snooped before. I'm not that kind of husband. But desperation changes you. What I found made my stomach drop through the floor. The house deed. Our house. Except it wasn't our house. It was dated 8 months ago and only Franka's name appeared on it. Not joint ownership like I'd always assumed when we bought this place 5 years back. Beneath it sat a property transfer document, a letter from a law firm in Vienna, and estate planning paperwork stamped with official seals. I spread everything across her desk, my hands trembling as I pieced it together. 18 months ago, Heinrich had been diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. He'd reached out to Franka through a lawyer, not to apologize or reconcile but to settle affairs. They'd been in contact ever since. Video calls. Emails. Lawyers coordinating everything. And Franka never told me. Not once. Not a single word in 18 months. There were bank statements from an account I didn't know existed. Money flowing in from Heinrich's estate attorney. Payments to a divorce lawyer dated 4 months ago. 4 months. I traced the timeline backward in my head. 4 months ago was November. We'd celebrated Thanksgiving together. She'd made her mother's apple strudel recipe. We'd watched football and talked about maybe taking a vacation to the Outer Banks next summer. And the whole time she'd already hired a lawyer to end our marriage. My phone rang. Franka. I answered on the first ring, my voice sharper than I intended. Yeah, I got your message. What the hell is going on, Franka? Her voice was calm, eerily calm, like she was reading from a script. My father died 3 days ago. I've been handling arrangements. I inherited his estate, the properties, the investments, everything. I'm moving back to Vienna. This house was transferred to me last year as part of the estate planning. I need you to leave so I can sell it. Wait, transferred to you? Last year? You've been planning this behind my back. Silence on the other end. Just her breathing. Franka, we've been married for 12 years. You don't just... She cut me off. Carter, I don't owe you an explanation. The house is mine. I'm giving you until Friday. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll get some settlement in the divorce, but I'd advise you to leave peacefully. Then she hung up. I stood there in her office, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal, and felt something shift inside me. Something cold and calculating. She wanted to play games? Fine. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't leaving. Not without knowing the full truth. That afternoon, while Franka was still wherever she was hiding, I tore through the garage. We had a storage area in the back where she kept personal items, mostly stuff from her art school days, old canvases, boxes she'd never unpacked since we moved to Charlotte. I'd always respected her privacy, never questioned what was back there. That respect died the moment I read her text message. I found a locked metal box hidden under a tarp behind some paint cans. I'd never noticed it before. Heavy, industrial-grade steel with a combination lock. I grabbed bolt cutters from my toolbox and snapped it open. Inside was a second phone, bank statements, printed emails, and flight confirmations. My hands went numb as I started reading. Franka had been traveling to Vienna. Not once or twice, but 6 times in the past year. May, July, September, November, January, and March. Every single trip, she told me she was attending art workshops in New York or visiting her mother who supposedly needed help with doctor appointments. But it was Vienna. Every single time. The bank statements showed deposits I couldn't trace. Wire transfers from Heinrich's estate attorney starting 14 months ago. Payments to a divorce lawyer named Patricia Connolly, a high-powered family attorney in uptown Charlotte. The first payment was dated 4 months ago, just like I'd seen in her office. But there were consultation fees going back even further to last summer. She'd been planning this for almost a year. Then I found the emails. Printed out, organized in a folder like evidence in a trial. One from Heinrich's lawyer dated 14 months ago. Franka, your father insists that severing your marriage is a prerequisite for full inheritance. He believes your husband is using you for financial security. Prove him wrong by making a clean break and the estate is yours. Another one, this time from Franka to the lawyer, dated 6 months ago. I understand completely. I'll handle Carter. He won't suspect anything until it's too late. He trusts me. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. The air left my lungs. This wasn't just about an inheritance. This was premeditated. Calculated. She'd been lying to my face for over a year, planning her exit, setting up her new life while I worked 60-hour weeks thinking I was building our future. But then I found something else at the bottom of the box. A photograph. Franka, smiling, her arm around another man. They were standing in front of St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, autumn leaves scattered on the cobblestones behind them. She looked happy. Really happy. Happier than I'd seen her in years. Written on the back in her handwriting, Vienna, October. Finally free. I turned the photo over again, studying the man's face. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. He had his hand on her waist, possessive and familiar. Who the hell was he? I sat in my car outside Franka's mother's house that evening, laptop open, rain streaking down the windshield. The man in the photo was tagged in one of Franka's old Instagram posts on a secondary account I didn't even know she had. His name was Lucas Bergman. Austrian. 35 years old. Worked in finance in Vienna. His profile was polished, professional, filled with photos of luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, and scenic European locations. And there, buried in his older posts from years ago, were photos of him and Franka together. Young, in love before she ever came to America. Lucas wasn't just some random guy. He was Franka's ex-boyfriend from Vienna, the one she'd dated before her exchange program. The one she told me she'd left behind when we got serious, when she decided to build a life with me in the States. They'd reconnected. The evidence was everywhere once I knew where to look. I found messages on the second phone, months and months of them. Flirty at first, talking about old times, shared memories, then romantic, then explicit. She'd been seeing him every time she visited Vienna. He knew about me. He knew about the inheritance plan. He knew everything. One message from Lucas, dated 2 months ago: "Once you're free of him, we can finally be together properly. Your father would have wanted this. He always said you deserved better than some American construction worker." Franka's response: "I know. I just need to get through a few more weeks." Carter suspects nothing. He's so focused on his bridges and projects, he barely notices I exist anymore. I read that line 5 times. Each time it cut deeper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to the airport, fly to Vienna, and confront them both. But I didn't, because now I knew the full picture. Franka had spent a year manipulating me, lying to me, building a life with another man while keeping me in the dark. She thought she'd planned the perfect escape. The inheritance, the house transfer, the secret relationship, all of it timed perfectly so I'd be blindsided and helpless. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. She thought I was just some trusting fool who'd roll over and accept whatever she handed me. She thought wrong. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, rain drumming on the roof. For the first time since this nightmare started, I smiled. Not from happiness but from clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. And Franka had no idea what was coming. Thursday morning, I walked into the high-rise office of Daniel Koresh, one of the best divorce attorneys in Charlotte. I'd worked with him 2 years ago on a municipal bridge project where he represented the city in a property dispute. He was sharp, ruthless, and he owed me a favor after I'd testified as an expert witness in his case. I laid everything out on his conference table. The secret inheritance, the house transfer documents, the affair, the printed emails, the timeline of her deception. Daniel leaned back in his leather chair and whistled low. "Carter, she's been planning this for over a year. Normally I'd say you're screwed. She's got the house in her name, the inheritance is technically hers, and North Carolina is a no-fault divorce state. But," I said, hearing the hesitation in his voice, "but North Carolina is also an equitable distribution state. Anything acquired during the marriage, even inheritances if they're commingled with marital assets, can be split. And if she used marital funds or assets to facilitate this plan, we can argue she defrauded you. Plus, she transferred the house into her name while you were still married without your knowledge or consent. That's a gray area we can exploit. What are my chances?" Daniel studied the documents again, his eyes scanning the bank statements and emails. "With this evidence? Better than you think. We can freeze the house sale, challenge the asset transfer, and sue for fraud. And North Carolina still recognizes alienation of affection claims. If we can prove this Lucas guy broke up your marriage, we can go after him too." He looked up at me. "But Carter, are you sure you want to go scorched earth on this? It's going to get ugly." I thought about Franka's cold voice on the phone. Her smug confidence. The way she'd looked at Lucas in that photograph. The year of lies. "Yeah," I said. "I'm sure." What Franka didn't know, what nobody knew except my accountant, was that 3 years ago I'd started a side consulting business. Engineering analysis for small private firms. I'd kept it separate, professional, completely independent from my day job. It generated about $40,000 a year in extra income that I'd been quietly investing in index funds and a retirement account. I wasn't broke. I wasn't dependent on her. I'd kept meticulous records of every dollar I'd contributed to our house, the renovations, our joint expenses. Daniel smiled. "Then let's go to war." Franka came home that afternoon to find me sitting calmly at the kitchen table, legal documents spread out in front of me like a hand of cards. She walked through the front door, designer bag in hand, expensive sunglasses perched on her head. She froze when she saw me, her confidence faltering for just a second. "Carter, what are you still doing here?" "I told you," I cut her off. "Sit down, Franka." She hesitated, then set her bag on the counter. "I don't have time for whatever this is. I have appointments." My voice went cold. "Sit down." Something in my tone made her comply. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me, arms crossed defensively. I slid a photograph across the table. The one of her and Lucas in Vienna. Her face went pale. All the color drained out. "Who is he?" I asked, keeping my voice level. It's none of your business, she stammered. Lucas Bergman. Your ex-boyfriend. The guy you've been sleeping with every time you told me you were at an art workshop. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. I slid another document across the table. This is your secret bank account. The one Heinrich's estate has been funding. And this, I tapped another page with my finger, is an email from you to your lawyer, dated 6 months ago, saying you'd handle me and I wouldn't suspect anything. Franka's carefully constructed facade cracked. Her hands trembled. Carter, you went through my private? I leaned forward. Your private files? Yeah. The ones you kept in our house. The house you secretly transferred into your name without telling me. That's fraud, Franka. That house is mine. My father, she started, her voice rising. Your father left you money, not the house. You used estate funds to buy me out of my own home without my knowledge. That's called marital fraud in North Carolina. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't know what you're talking about. I have lawyers, real lawyers who, I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Who are about to get served with an emergency injunction I filed this morning. As of 2 hours ago, all your accounts are frozen. You can't sell the house. You can't transfer any assets. And you can't leave the country without violating a court order. The color drained completely from her face. You, what? I stood up slowly, gathering my documents. Welcome to consequences, Franka. Enjoy the next few months. They're going to be hell. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Franka's perfect plan disintegrate like wet paper. The court ruled that the house transfer was done in bad faith during the marriage. Since I'd contributed significantly to the mortgage and paid for major renovations including the kitchen remodel and new roof, I was entitled to half its value. $285,000. Her lawyer, the expensive Patricia Connolly she'd hired months ago, tried to argue that Heinrich's estate was separate property, protected from marital division. My lawyer countered brilliantly. Franka had commingled the inheritance by using estate funds to pay off joint credit card debts and make house payments while planning the divorce. I documented everything. Every payment, every transfer, every dollar. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Helena Briggs, agreed with us. Franka was ordered to pay me half the inheritance's liquid value as part of the divorce settlement. But here's where everything got truly interesting, where Franka's carefully laid plans hit a wall she never saw coming. Heinrich's Austrian business partners, the ones she dismissed as minor complications, weren't happy about the estate being tied up in American litigation. Turned out Heinrich had debts nobody had mentioned to Franka. Bad investments in Eastern European properties. Legal disputes over developments in Vienna and Salzburg. When the estate got frozen by the North Carolina court, the Austrian partners filed their own claims against the estate. Suddenly, Franka's $4.7 million inheritance was being picked apart by creditors, lawyers, angry business associates, and international legal fees. I watched from a distance as her world unraveled. She moved in with her mother in a cramped apartment in East Charlotte. She stopped going to the gallery. Her social media went dark. And Lucas? That piece of work disappeared the moment he realized Franka wasn't going to be his rich Austrian princess after all. He stopped answering her calls. Blocked her on social media. Just vanished back into his Vienna finance life like she'd never existed. I saw her once during this period at a mediation session our lawyers arranged. She looked hollow. Exhausted. 10 years older than she had a month before. She wouldn't meet my eyes. When her lawyer tried to negotiate a lower settlement, I just shook my head. Daniel had advised me I could push for even more, but I didn't. I took my half of the house value, my portion of the settlement, and I walked away. But I wasn't quite done yet. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my new downtown Charlotte loft, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Hardwood floors, modern furniture, a workspace with dual monitors where I ran my expanding consulting business. I'd used my settlement wisely. Partnered with 2 former colleagues, landed contracts with private developers across the Carolinas. We were pulling in over $300,000 a year now, and it was just the beginning. I'd met someone new too. Her name was Rachel, a project manager at a tech firm. Smart, funny, brutally honest. We took things slow. I wasn't rushing into anything ever again. But here's the part Franka would never know, the final piece of revenge I'd kept to myself. That second phone I'd found in her lockbox? I hadn't just read the messages. I'd forwarded key ones to Heinrich's estate lawyers in Austria. The ones where she discussed manipulating the inheritance conditions. Where she and Lucas talked about leveraging the estate for their own plans. I told them everything. About the affair. About her scheme. About how she'd violated the spirit of Heinrich's wishes. Turned out Heinrich's will had a morality clause buried in the legal language. If Franka was found to have acted in bad faith or defrauded the estate's intentions, the executors had discretion to reduce her share. They exercised that discretion. Her inheritance got cut by an additional 30%. She never found out why. She blamed the business partners, the legal fees, the American court system. But it was me. I'd made sure she paid for every lie, every betrayal, every moment she'd smiled to my face while planning my destruction. I didn't do it purely for revenge. I did it for justice. For accountability. For the principle that actions have consequences. And as I stood in my new loft, looking out over the city where I'd rebuilt my entire life from the ground up, I realized something profound. She hadn't broken me. She'd freed me. Freed me from a marriage built on lies. Freed me from a woman who never truly valued me. Freed me to become the person I was always meant to be. It was a random Tuesday evening, 8 months after the divorce was finalized. I was at dinner with Rachel at a nice Italian place in South End when my phone buzzed. A text from Franka. I hadn't heard from her in months. My thumb hovered over the notification and Rachel noticed. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. I opened the message. "Carter, I hope you're doing well. I've been reflecting a lot lately. I made terrible mistakes and I've regretted how things ended between us. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm truly sorry. I lost everything that mattered chasing something that wasn't real. I hope you found happiness." I stared at the message for a long moment. Rachel was watching me carefully, reading my expression. "Someone from a past life," I said quietly. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to tell Franka everything. About the morality clause. About how I'd helped dismantle her inheritance. About how every lie she'd told had ricocheted back and destroyed her. But then I realized something important. She was already living with those consequences. Every single day. The lost money. The lost relationship. The broken dreams. The realization that her father's conditions had been right, that I'd never been using her, that she'd destroyed something real for something fake. I didn't need to respond. The silence would say everything that needed saying. "No," I told Rachel, putting my phone away. "I'm not." She smiled and reached across the table, taking my hand. "Good. The best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's becoming someone they can never touch again." I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of the past year lift just a little more. She was right. Franka had tried to erase me, to reduce me to an obstacle in her path to wealth and happiness. Instead, I'd become something she could never hurt again. 2 days later, Franka texted again. Just one message: "I'm moving to Innsbruck. Starting over. Teaching art to children. I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better." I read it twice. She sounded different. Humbled. Maybe even genuine. Maybe losing everything had finally taught her something about value, about what matters. I didn't respond to that message either. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd moved on. My life didn't have space for her anymore, not even for closure conversations or forgiveness rituals. I'd built something new, something clean, something honest. People ask me sometimes if I'm bitter about the 12 years I spent with Franka. If I regret the time, the energy, the love I invested in a marriage that was apparently always doomed. Honestly, I don't. Those years taught me everything I needed to know about trust, about awareness, about the difference between loving someone and really knowing them. They showed me that people can change, or maybe they reveal who they always were beneath the surface you wanted to believe in. Franka had always been capable of this betrayal. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The signs were there. The distance. The secrets. The way she'd pulled away over the years while I buried myself in work. Rachel and I are talking about taking a trip to the mountains next month. Nothing serious, just a long weekend in Asheville. We're not rushing anything. No marriage talk, no big commitments, just two people who enjoy each other's company and respect each other's boundaries. My consulting business is thriving. Last month we won a contract for a major downtown redevelopment project that'll keep us busy for 2 years. I've got a team I trust, work I'm proud of, a life I built from the ashes of betrayal. Sometimes late at night when I'm working on blueprints, I think about that text message from Franka. "I want you out by Friday." I think about how confident she was, how certain that she held all the cards. And I smile. Not from bitterness, but from the understanding of how wrong she was. She thought she was taking everything from me. The house, the marriage, the future we'd planned. But all she did was clear the way for the life I was always meant to build. A life without lies. Without manipulation. without someone who saw me as an obstacle instead of a partner. Last week something interesting happened. I got a LinkedIn request. Lucas Bergman. The man from Vienna. The one who'd helped destroy my marriage. He was trying to connect with me professionally, probably fishing to see if I knew anything about why Franka's inheritance had been slashed so dramatically. I stared at that request for a long time. I haven't accepted it yet. But I might. Because if there's one thing I learned from this entire nightmare, it's that information is power. And you never know when you'll need leverage for whatever comes next. The game isn't over just because I won this round. For now though, I'm content. I've got my loft, my business, Rachel, and a future that's entirely mine to shape. Franka's probably in Innsbruck right now, teaching art to kids, living a quiet life far from the wealth and glamour she chased so desperately. Maybe she's found peace. Maybe she's still struggling with the consequences of her choices. Either way, it's not my concern anymore. I've learned to let go of things I can't control and focus on building something worth protecting. That's the real victory. Not revenge, not justice, but the simple act of becoming someone who can't be destroyed by someone else's betrayal. Someone who knows his worth. Someone who won't settle for less than he deserves. That's who Carter Williams became. And that's exactly who I needed to be all along. If this shocked you, subscribe, like, comment, and share, because the next story is worse.